Tonight, a major disruption is unfolding at the US-Canada border, sending shockwaves through communities on both sides. The usually steady flow of travelers and goods between the two nations has been thrown into chaos, as new restrictions take effect with little warning. Canada has suddenly restricted overland travel to Alaska, a move that has caught many by surprise. The Alaska Highway, a vital artery connecting the state to the rest of the U.S., now faces unprecedented limitations, leaving travelers and businesses scrambling for answers. On August 2, 2025, Ottawa announced sweeping new rules that constrict the land routes linking Alaska to the lower 48 states. The government cited security concerns and the need for tighter border management, but details remain scarce, fueling speculation and uncertainty. While this is not a total closure, the sudden policy shift has upended the lives of thousands of Americans who depend on these routes for work, family, and essential supplies. Many families, caught mid-journey, now find themselves stranded at border checkpoints, unsure of when or if they'll be allowed to continue. Commercial truck drivers, military families relocating to new posts, and seasonal workers are now subject to new permit requirements, strict transit windows, and more frequent inspections. These changes have led to significant delays, confusion, and, in some cases, outright denials of entry, disrupting livelihoods and plans. The abruptness of these measures has sparked widespread confusion and anxiety, exposing just how vulnerable Alaska is to decisions made in Ottawa. The state's reliance on Canadian goodwill for overland access has never been more apparent. Many Americans see this as more than a regulatory tweak. They view it as a blockade, a sudden barrier to their freedom of movement and economic stability. Protests have erupted at several border crossings, with citizens demanding answers and a swift resolution. The flow of people and goods has become a logistical nightmare. Truckloads of supplies are stuck in limbo, and some Alaskan stores are already reporting shortages of essential items. The state's economy and social fabric are under threat, as uncertainty grows with each passing day. Ottawa insists these are temporary measures necessary for national security and public safety, but for those affected the impact is immediate and severe, with no clear end in sight. The question on everyone's mind is simple: why now? What prompted this sudden change, and can it be resolved before the damage becomes permanent? Families, businesses, and entire communities are left waiting for answers. The stability of long-standing cross-border agreements is suddenly in doubt. Diplomatic channels are working overtime, but trust has been shaken, and the path forward remains uncertain. The world is watching closely to see how both nations respond to this crisis. The outcome will not only shape the future of US-Canada relations, but also set a precedent for how countries manage shared borders in an increasingly uncertain world. The border crisis quickly became a political flashpoint, igniting fierce debate across the country and drawing the attention of leaders on both sides of the border. What began as a regional dispute soon spiraled into a national controversy, with the media spotlight intensifying the sense of urgency and division. At the center of this storm stood former President Donald Trump, who wasted no time in making his voice heard. Known for his combative style and ability to command headlines, Trump seized the moment to position himself as the defender of American interests. Trump blasted Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, calling the restrictions a disgraceful blockade and an act of hostility. His words, delivered with characteristic force, reverberated through social media and news outlets, fueling outrage among his supporters and critics alike. He framed the move as a direct attack on American sovereignty, rallying his supporters and escalating tensions. Trump's rhetoric painted the situation as a test of national strength, urging Americans to stand united against what he described as foreign aggression. Trump called for strong retaliation, tariffs, punitive measures, and a show of American strength. He demanded that the United States respond with decisive action, warning that any sign of weakness would only invite further challenges from abroad. His rhetoric has turned a diplomatic challenge into a political battle, making compromise harder. Lawmakers found themselves under pressure to take sides, as the issue became a litmus test for patriotism and party loyalty. The Biden administration now faces mounting pressure to respond forcefully. Every decision is scrutinized, with critics accusing the White House of either being too soft or too aggressive, and allies urging caution to avoid further escalation. Trump's intervention has amplified public anger and made quiet diplomacy nearly impossible. Town halls and social media are ablaze with heated arguments, as ordinary Americans demand answers and action from their leaders. Every move is scrutinized through a partisan lens, complicating negotiations. The media's relentless coverage ensures that no detail goes unnoticed, and every statement is dissected for political advantage. The issue is no longer just about Alaska, it's a new front in America's political wars. What was once a regional dispute has become a symbol of broader struggles over national identity, security, and leadership. Diplomats must now navigate not only international tensions but also a volatile domestic landscape, where every compromise risks backlash from an increasingly polarized public. The stakes have never been higher. With the world watching and tempers flaring at home, the outcome of this crisis could reshape not just US-Canada relations, but the very fabric of American politics. To understand Canada's decision, look beyond the headlines. Ottawa says the restrictions are about protecting fragile ecosystems and honoring commitments to Indigenous peoples. The Alaska Highway cuts through sensitive wilderness and First Nations territories, and increased traffic has taken a toll. Canada frames the measures as temporary, allowing for environmental assessments and Indigenous consultations. The government insists it's a matter of responsible governance, not hostility. Indigenous groups have requested action to address disruptions to wildlife and traditional lands. Canada is asserting its right to manage its territory in line with its values and laws. Whether the US accepts this rationale is now at the heart of the diplomatic standoff. The real-world impact of the border restrictions is immediate and severe for ordinary Americans, especially those living in or relying on Alaska. Families across the country are glued to the news, anxious about how these changes will affect their daily lives and their loved ones. Truckers, who are the backbone of Alaska's supply chain, now face long delays and constant uncertainty at the border. Their livelihoods are threatened, as every hour lost waiting means less income and more stress. The ripple effect is felt all the way from the highways to the homes and businesses that depend on timely deliveries. Essential goods, food, medicine, and fuel are now at risk of costly shortages. Supermarkets struggle to keep shelves stocked, pharmacies ration critical medications, and gas stations run low or even close, leaving communities vulnerable and worried about what tomorrow will bring. Military families relocating to Alaska are caught in limbo, unable to move their households and pets. For those serving the nation, the uncertainty adds another layer of stress to an already challenging life, as they wait for answers and hope for a resolution. Seasonal workers who are vital to Alaska's oil, fishing, and tourism industries find themselves stranded. Without their labor, entire industries face slowdowns or shutdowns, threatening jobs and the state's economy. Small businesses are scrambling to adapt, facing empty shelves and rising costs. Many are forced to raise prices just to survive, putting even more pressure on local families and communities. What was once a routine drive for families and workers is now a major obstacle. Long waits and uncertainty at the border threaten financial stability and disrupt lives, making even simple travel a source of anxiety. The restrictions have exposed Alaska's dependence on a single, fragile link to the rest of the country. With only one main route in and out, any disruption has outsized consequences for everyone who calls Alaska home. Frustration and anxiety are mounting as people face delays, uncertainty, and the fear of being cut off from essential services and loved ones. The human toll is undeniable. Families are separated, plans are put on hold, and the emotional strain grows with each passing day. Decisions made in Ottawa and Washington are reshaping lives overnight as political leaders debate solutions and the public waits for relief. The urgency for a solution grows by the day as communities, businesses, and families demand action to restore stability and hope for the future. Is Canada's move legal? International law experts say yes. Every nation controls its own borders and transit routes, even with long-standing agreements in place. Canada's actions, framed as regulatory and based on environmental and Indigenous concerns, are within its sovereign rights. This is not a formal blockade or act of war but a legal exercise of authority. The U.S. has little legal recourse. Diplomacy, not lawsuits, is the only real option. The situation is a stark reminder. Access through another country is a privilege, not a right. The U.S. must persuade, not compel, Canada to ease restrictions. Strong relationships and dialogue matter more than legal arguments. When domestic priorities shift, even close allies can find themselves at odds. The legal framework alone can't guarantee open borders. Behind the scenes, diplomats are racing to find a solution. U.S. officials are pushing for exemptions for truckers, military families, and essential workers. Canada signals the measures are temporary and open to negotiation. Both sides are exploring special permits and designated corridors to ease the crisis. the challenge balancing Canada's environmental and Indigenous priorities with America's urgent needs. Success depends on creative compromise and mutual respect. A diplomatic breakthrough could restore access and reaffirm the U.S.-Canada partnership. The outcome will test the resilience of both nations' relationship. The world is watching for signs of cooperation or further division. Domestic politics are driving the crisis on both sides of the border. In the U.S., Trump's attacks forced the Biden administration to appear tough, making compromise risky. In Canada, Trudeau's government is under pressure to uphold environmental and Indigenous commitments, key promises to his base. Both leaders are playing to their home audiences, complicating diplomacy. The dispute is now a symbol of national identity and political strength. For Biden, the challenge is to resolve the crisis without seeming weak. For Trudeau, it's about defending Canadian values without harming the U.S. relationship. The needs of their political bases pull them in opposite directions. International disputes are often shaped by domestic battles. Navigating these pressures is as crucial as the negotiations themselves. This crisis is a stress test for U.S.-Canada friendship. The outcome will shape the future of cross-border cooperation and trust. A respectful compromise could strengthen the alliance. A prolonged conflict could cause lasting damage. Even if a deal is reached, political wounds may linger. The episode reveals how fragile even the closest partnerships can be under domestic and populist pressures. Rebuilding trust will require sustained diplomatic effort. The relationship demands constant care and open communication. How Washington and Ottawa handle this moment will define their partnership for years to come.